Hey friends, welcome to Class 5, Introduction to Shaping Bases. Now, this class will be using the models we used for exercises and what we taught in the last class and the class before. So this Baby Scorpion by Ricardo Foschke, and then the Chibi Lizard by Mark Thompson. And once again, thank you to both you guys for letting me use your designs for this video. But yeah, basically we're gonna go over how this collapsed base will turn into the finished product. I know a lot of people have trouble kind of understanding where to go from here, what to do first, and then how to get some of the structures that aren't completed in the crease pattern. And in the same way, on box pleat designs, I usually find it to be a little bit easier as the flaps are much more defined generally. You'll have a base that kind of looks like this, just a bunch of flaps all laying together. This one should be a little bit more easy to tell what are the structures, but I'll also be using this to show some different styles of shaping, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. So what do I mean by styles of shaping? So really quickly, I'll give an overview. Part of the shaping when people first have a model or if they fold from diagrams is I see a lot of people, they just try to shape it exactly like the designer. And that's, for one part, really good. I think it's a really good practice to try to achieve the level of shaping that the designer has. For most models, the designer, they're the best at shaping their own model. They have that design set out. So practicing to try to get it close is really good practice, especially if you're working on your shaping abilities. So we're going to kind of cover that as we're going to turn this guy into the photo we see here. And then I'll just explain some mentalities and thoughts and tips and tricks to try to improve yourself as you shape with this kind of style. And now the other style is taking your own creative directive. And I think this is an equally important part of learning how to shape, and also just really important for origami as it leads to more creative interpretations. It leads to more growth, more ideas thrown around. And that kind of looks here where I took more of a take on a realistic scorpion in terms of the proportions used and some of the features and shaping of the legs. It doesn't really look like the baby scorpion anymore. It's more like a scorpion. And along with this, while this model is quite balanced, using more creative direction will lead to more interpretive poses. So right now, the scorpion is in a very balanced pose, and a lot of the things I do is in a very balanced pose. But I'll show on screen really quick using the example of my samurai. I have my general samurai version 3 pose, which is very balanced. It's just standing straight up. It's got a little bit of character. And then there's a action pose, off balance, midair strike shaping. And it's the exact same model, same folds, but just a different view, interpretation, and thought process on the shaping. So I'll talk through a bit of that as well. And I think not a lot of people are fully aware of that, or they're aware of it, but they don't recognize that always as a way to go, just because there's a lot of, I guess, leaps of faith you have to take in making that creative direction. But I really want to see more of that happen in origami, as well as I want to see myself work on that a ton more. So yeah, let's get into some of the shaping. We'll start off with this guy for part 1, and let's get to it. Hey friends, so we're going to start with the Chibi Lizard by Mark Thompson, and this space is very much different than the model. However, the folding sequence to get from here to here really isn't that difficult. The more part is, when you're solving this, is discovering for yourself how the folds work out, how all the structures work, so you can get it as close to the finished model as possible. So in this case, we're going to be doing shape it like the designer. That's normally the interpretation you want to go for when you first solve a model, because obviously you're trying to fold it. So here we have a completed version. And so let's first count what we're missing. So one, we need the eye. There's nearly the full structure here. You can definitely tell that this flap becomes eye. And then we have the arms and the legs. And then you can see the tail color changes as well, which you can already kind of estimate. It's just, you know, if you valley fold this guy up, then you make this little color change. But the important note is, how do we get these legs and how do we get the arms? So I think the first part, at least the arms, comes from this big crimp fold that runs along the inside of the model. And while if you're solving this on your own, normally what you should do is look at a picture and study the picture of the designer's fold. So potentially you only have this view, but generally you can see that this is a crimp fold, especially when you compare it to yours. You can see that there's angle cut through here. This is the angle cut on top, and this part is a little bit split from the head. So all these details are really what you want to try to identify for yourself before going into the folding. And it's not that hard to try to pick things out. You just got to be a little bit observant. And essentially that's how you're going to start to be able to fold in these shapes with confidence and being like, hey, I'm pretty sure this goes here. This is how I'll do it. Okay, and then the other parts, let's see, we have the legs. So we have, say, like this kind of shape. And now this is where your experience with diagrams will help a lot. So if this is really hard, I recommend you just fold a lot more diagrams, get really familiar with how people generally create leg flaps, how they, you know, shape up, whatever. And again, this isn't for that complex of a model. But as you can see here, again, another crimp. So you can tell we have a mountain fold on the top of the leg. And if we have a mountain fold on the top of the leg, as you see here, to let it lay flat, the only resulting would be to have a valley. So that makes this crimp fold like this. And then obviously things to keep note, we don't have reference points when we're shaping a model, nor should you really seek out reference points. Again, this is still pretty creative, even though we're folding it like the designer has it. So key things to note, we do have the reference point that this folds at the top and goes down, and you have just a little bit of a leg left. So when you want to go for it, you really want to try to imitate it as much as possible. So as you're folding, you know that the top part starts right at this joint. So if anything, you can fold this up and practice this mountain fold, right? And it needs to go up to just a little bit right here. So you might have to guess and check a little bit. Don't crease too hard on your first go, right? You want to see how it looks first. A lot of people rush and they just crease as hard as they can on everything, and don't do that. Take your time with the creases. So what I'm seeing here, this looks pretty good, at least for mountain fold. And then at the tip, so I'm just going to crease this a little bit harder. I'm still not creasing all the way. And the last thing I need is the angle. So I'm going to do the angle relevant kind of to the head. But I'm also predicting that, hey, we have this crimp fold that we're going to have to do. So I'm not exactly going to pull this all the way under. I'm going to leave a little bit of room for when we do the crimp fold, that this will swing under just as it is in the designer's model. And I'm still not creasing this all the way, as it may need to be adjusted later on. You know, don't be fully set on things. That's part of shaping. So that's how we go about this. And now let's kind of see what we get when we do this crimp fold down the middle, as you see here. All right, so right now we're about here. And we're going to attempt to do something similar with this crimp here. Now, again, when we're looking at the picture of the designers, we just have to ignore the fact that the hands are there. Obviously, we can see the hands are folded on top, which means it happens after this crimp fold. So what are some things we can notice to, I guess, find reference points for ourselves when there are none? So for one part, you can kind of see, if you were looking at this as a picture, it happens right at this top joint between these two folds, which we have this one right here. So that's where it'll start. And then at the hand, we see that this crimp continues all the way down the hand. So that makes it pretty easy. But even just from looking at the model, you see we got a little corner right here. And a lot of times designers will use corners for appendages just because corners will stick out more and it's a little bit easier to shape that into a point or make it, a little bit more 3D than like a flat surface. So that's a telltale to where to start. And this crimp fold is obviously going through both layers. So again, practice your diagrams so you'll recognize these shapes, because you're just going to have to do a crimp fold. You're kind of going to have to freehand it, but you can think of it like anything crimp fold you've done in a diagram where, first you start with the mountain fold, line it up properly. So that's what I'm going to do here. Model's going to open up a little bit, but we're going to start with the mountains on both sides. And I'm paying attention to being precise, of course. And also, again, I'm not creasing super hard, but enough so that the crease stays just like this, right? And at this point, you can kind of check to see, oh yeah, now I can see that if I, initiate the crimp a little bit, I can see the hands forming. So here we go, just like this. And now just the valley fold. Generally, you don't want to do too much, but you can kind of see like how big of a hand do I need? I need a little bit to work with, but it's not overkill. Like this crimp fold only comes up to this part of the neck. So again, try to replicate that exactly as precise as possible. You might not be able to get it the first couple times. This does take practice, but really seek to improve by folding as closely to the designer as possible, for practice, of course. And that's the style of shaping we're going for here. Don't cheat yourself out and be like, it's all right. Really try to get it where you want it to be. And that'll help you just succeed in folding models really well. And again, so we just started with this leg on this side, but it also helps us to understand how far on this crimp we need to go, because it's going to place this foot in the correct angle that we want for the head. So as you can see, these guys, they nearly match up. You want to be, again, that's part of the precision process to go with. So now that we have this crimp fold in place, we can go ahead, do the second foot, because we're, pretty confident that we're good to go. And for me, at least for feet, if I'm folding in a balanced model, I just use the other side as a reference point. So again, start with this mount fold, and then I'm just going to crimp using the other leg as reference. And I mountain folded a little bit too high. There we go. And just like that. And that's how you can stay precise to your model. That's how you're able to get your model to balance on legs. I know a lot of people have a hard time getting models to balance. And actually this model, it's going to tip forward most of the time. But if you see my other model, I just weighted the back with a paper clip, and it stands up straight. But for most models, if you want it to, both feet to fit on the floor, that's a good way to measure up and stay precise. All right, so right now we got the legs and we got the first structure for the arms. Obviously the hands aren't done yet. So yeah, we'll continue with the hands before going to the other parts. As basically what I'm doing here, I'm doing a lot of the extremities that I can automatically recognize from the outside. They're very easy telltales on what to do. So, you do them first, get as far as you can, and then a lot of times it'll help you finish the rest of the model. Very similarly to like doing the pre-creases when we're creasing a 22.5 design. We crease the ones that are easy that you know, and they lead to getting you the other ones. So last small little details here. You see how in the photo we have this right here. It changes angle. Now this is a little bit trickier of a move. I don't think not many people, even if they fold diagrams a lot, will fully recognize this at first. But I'm giving you the cheat codes here. And whenever you see something where there's a overlapping flap and then it cuts under, you can use a swivel fold for that. So here I'm like, basically, if I mountain fold this side, right, you will get this angle on that guy. However, it is connected to our flap here, meaning that when we mountain fold it, right, something gets in the way. And that means we swivel fold it here. And that works out because, again, we have this little extra part that sticks out here. So I'll go ahead and do that really quick. It's a little bit hard to explain. But again, this just comes with practice for identifying what to do. But if you guys are familiar with swivel folds, which you should be, and if you're not, you'll find some swivel folds to do in diagrams, right? Swivel fold. And that gets us the head shape here. And as you can see, that actually extends the length of this flap. So now we're really going to be able to get the hand shape that we have here, which is just a valley mountain kind of pleat, which is probably the easiest thing we're going to do here. Just valley and then mountain, with the focus on the top part like this. Again, goal, try to match up with the bottom. Obviously ours looks a little bit different because our swivel fold didn't come out as much, but it's generally the same shape. And it's still looking clean, so you can call it precise. I'm not going to show the other side because you guys should know what to do. We're going to move on to what I would call the harder structures to interpret. All right, so we've gone through most of this pretty easily so far, but what would I say is like the hard parts of this model and just any kind of 22.5 model in general is I would say a lot of the parts that are left unfolded or uncreased become the hard parts to interpret. Because I definitely understand that while you have a model like this, especially for the first time, there's a lot of fear in messing it up. Right, so if we have this huge part that's unfolded, it can give people a lot of anxiety as to like, I don't want to mess with this, you know, I might mess it up, you know, and so forth. And so yeah, I totally get that. But I'll kind of show you your thought process, and sometimes it does require a little bit of experimentation, but as long as you're careful, you'll still result with a clean product, and you kind of get there. The other hard part is this eye. So our eye here, it's wide. It doesn't look like any normal structure that we have in like, you know, normal origami. But there's a couple things we can kind of identify, and I'll just show it for the sake of this kind of being a tutorial. So yeah, let's do the eye first, because while it looks scary, it's easier than the back portion, or less scary than the back portion. Because while it doesn't look like we have most of the things for it, we do. All right, so the first part is we have this flap here, right? And if we fully extend it, because of this outside portion here, which is this on the crease pattern, it only goes this far. Now, if we look at our photo here, we kind of see that, hey, this extends past, I guess, this little line right here. And, you know, how can we do that without tearing this part open? Well, we can fold it diagonally, right? So we can literally just fold diagonally, pretty much up to like that line, I guess, because it would fit for this paper. Now, obviously, depending on how you fold that, it might stretch a little bit more. But generally, I do try to find a reference point I'm okay with. That way I can replicate it on the other side. And you might think like, hey, boys, that's not it. But this is another technique that a lot of designers use, a lot of diagrams use. You've probably seen this in the past. Whenever you have a tucked flap like this, you can untuck that flap and it pulls outwards, just like this. So this isn't like a super trivial thing to kind of understand, but it's something to look out for because it's a super handy technique that a lot of people use. So if there's a weird color change or if there's a weird structure like this, look to see if there's some kind of swivel like here or some kind of unwrap of layers like this. And as you can see, we generally have the eye. Now the one from Mark I saw has this extra little crease line here that you can see on this guy. So really all you have to do to add this detail is fold it back and then fold it back normally with just a little bit of a crimp or pleat or whatever you want to call this. Just like that. Again, small detail, but the added precision will help, or the added detail is going to help us with a cool finished product. And the last thing to do is, hey, now it's really easy to tell. You just mount and fold this corner down so it hides underneath and gives us that rectangular eye. Once again, attempting to make it as close to the designers as possible. So yeah, that's how you go about the eye. You can see it was only like 3 steps and pretty much just like mountain valley folds. So again, pretty intimidating, not hard at all. Just know your tools from what you've learned in diagrams, your tools being unwraps, swivel folds, whatnot, and it'll make the process a lot easier. So I'm going to finish up the other side real quick. I'm not going to show this. Again, just practice it for yourself on the other side, using the techniques and tips I told you to do. And then we're going to go for that last part. All right, so now we are finishing up the back of our chibi lizard. So let's take a look on what details we can notice about it before going for the folds, just so we know kind of what direction to approach it in. So what do we have right now, right? Again, we're going to act like we're looking at a picture of the designer's fold, but we nearly have the full model. And if you compare ours to the designer's, we notice, hey, there's a whole portion folded down and presumably tucked in before a small tail peeking out. And now the color change happens where the I guess the green, it matches up with a seam leading to this horizontal part made through this section here, and the tail's crimped upwards at an angle. So while this is simple, this is much of a design choice. I think it's really awesome. However, it is more of a rat fold, which if you're not familiar with that term, it's right about there. I don't believe there's an exact reference point, but it's not too hard to replicate. But that's basically our focus for when we do this. And we notice the tail is, it's not too short. It sticks out a fair ways, and it's not below the feet. So those are kind of the details that we're going to want to go for on ours. And there's just a very small bit of white left on top. So let's start. What I would do and what I normally do and what I did to actually solve this is that's kind of our known point, right? This point right here. So we can kind of pre-crease it. So when I do this, I don't want to go all the way up just because we have to preserve this section. But I do want to kind of mark out where our color change is going to happen. So we can easily do that by just putting in a mountain fold, right? Kind of like this to the corner with no real reference point, but just kind of gauging based on what we have here. And with that, once I have the point, which is very important to keep precise, I'm just going to mark down roughly where that's going to be. And I'm going to do that on the same side, or on the same thing on the other side, and very much match up to, see, I can see my crease on this side. And again, this is a lot of, it's a little bit of prep work. And again, it's very similar to what we're doing with pre-creasing, where we're getting what we know down, and it'll lead to us actually achieving the structure later on. I'll give you guys a little spoiler. This is, you definitely kind of have to figure out this fold as you're experimenting with it, but hopefully going through this process will help you see that when you do this for yourself, this is the process you're able to do to discover these things. All right, the next thing we can notice is, hey, there's like maybe like a centimeter, a little bit more than a centimeter on top here of white before it, reverse folds down or mountain folds in. So we're gonna try to replicate that same thing. What I like to do is use my thumb as a visual to kind of help measure, like, if we chopped off this much or if we folded that much in, is that gonna be where we want? And we want it about at this point with a little bit of white exposed towards the tail. And so you can kind of guess, right? I'm gonna pinch here and then about to here. And that's about where we want our reverse fold. So we're going to kind of mark that out, doing actual reverse fold, kind of like this, right? And say, okay, that's not quite enough. We want a little bit more on top. There we go. And then right about where the tail would be, we just want a little bit sticking out. Not too much, not too little. You can check both sides, make sure it's okay. And that's pretty good. It's not too bad. We're almost at another reference point here, which you might want to use if you're going for things just to test out, see if the designer do it. But for design purposes or style purposes, I'm going to go for here. So now we got a reverse fold. All right. Now we need to do another reverse fold to get the tail out. And then we have to figure out how to get that color change. So now this part, it's fairly easy. We're just going to mock out where our tail is going to be. And as you notice, wherever we reverse fold, it's going to be white. Just like on this side. The top part's white. So we want to angle it. And the reason why I had us kind of pre-crease the color change is so we can imagine the size of the tail, right? Because when we mountain fold along our crease, which you can see here, I'm not sure if you can see that. It's right here. That's how short our tail is going to be. And so now we're really going to look at the designer's photo to really try to get all the proportions the same, or as much as possible, before creasing down our reverse fold. Just like so. Cool. So now we have this. Now we have to implement the color change. Now, there could be a couple ways to do this. The one route would just be to mountain fold everything up. But as you can see, we lose that detail of the the color change lining up, which gives us a really clean looking tail. We could also reverse fold this in, but again, that wouldn't give us the same kind of element here. So what's kind of the hybrid? Well, we can look here and we can notice there's a mountain fold that creates this part. So we can start off with our pre-crease here, and what would give us that mountain fold if we mountain folded this in like this. So this is kind of like a two-staged fold, but our pre-crease goes all the way in, and then now we kind of have some free reign on where we make this mountain fold, because it can go all the way in, it can go where we want, but again, we want where the mountain fold, or where the color change exists. We want that to be where our tail exists. And as you can see, we're a little bit off, right? You guys can see that? And we're a little bit low relevant to the foot on the other thing. So first thing I'm gonna do is just push this mountain fold a little bit higher, like this, right? Now we have good references on our feet. I'm gonna just do a slight crease like that. And now we need to change our tail. So for that, I'm just going to carefully change our crimp here on top. And see, again, you don't want to crease hard because you never know if you're going to have to change your creases. You want to leave it flexible to do so. That way, you know, if you like mess up, you're able to switch it. Right, so I'm just going to bring that a little bit down. And if you have a good understanding on reverse folds and the proportions, this shouldn't be too challenging. I'm actually going to undo this for the time being. Fix our reverse fold. There you go. And then now we can check again the proportions. So once again, fold that in. Fold in here. And try to bring it right about where we want it to be. It's about there. So you can see we're a lot closer, and this will require a little bit of fidgeting to really get the full proportions to work. As you can see, I didn't crease anything on the other side. And this is just a lot of, at this point, this is why it's called shaping. You know, you kind of fidget with it, really get it to line up like this. And let's see, looks like we're gonna have to pull or reverse fold out a little bit more and potentially drop our color change ever so slightly. There you go. Yep, we made a little crease there we didn't want to do. And we're pretty lined up. You know, take your time on this. I'm kind of rushing through it, but that way you can get the proportions you want. You can see this one's pretty much exact. This one's still a little bit off. But yeah, so on yours, spend time with that, but basically do the same thing on the other side, right? Other side should be fairly easier, and now I can kind of make a better guess on where to put our color change, and then our reverse fold. To net the same results. Just like that. And again, and that's how you kind of get shapes and details with these more obscure forms of structures when you have a crease pattern. This video is kind of long. I know I spent a lot of time kind of explaining this. It's not the most trivial thing, and you might not get it first try. This model is great practice. I recommend trying to fold this maybe a couple times, solve this crease pattern until you can get perfect shaping. Also, it's really fun. I actually memorized this just because I was fiddling, you know, with paper and folding them all the time. But yeah, really practice this. This is a good example for many different kinds of shaping. If you want, you can see what other structures you can get with this chibi lizard. Another small detail I did here is I just sunk the nose a little bit to get it a little bit shorter, you know. Add details like that, maybe round up eyes, use nice paper, different color changes, all sorts of things. But hopefully that kind of gave you guys, I don't know, maybe confidence boost or just some thought processes to go through when you approach bases like that. And that way you're not scared to know where to shape, because a lot of times these 22.5 degree crease patterns, the base doesn't quite look like the finished model. So yeah, hopefully that, guys, helped you out. Thanks for making it through part one. This is gonna be a pretty long video. But I'll see you in the next video shaping up some box pleat bases. And yeah, thanks for watching.
All this origami, all this origami, all this origami got me going kamikaze. Kamikaze, now